Setbacks are temporary, but comebacks, they are legendary. Welcome back to the PSI Effect, where we pause, shift, and ignite purpose that speaks louder than your past. This is Nuge, and together with Frankie, we're your hosts in this space, and your comeback starts now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PSI Effect podcast. I'm Nuge, and I am here with Frankie, and we are your hosts in this space. Looking forward to spending some time with you today, and glad that you are here with us. We appreciate all the love and all the support that you've been giving this podcast. We appreciate your comments and messages that you have provided for us throughout the social spaces. We really do appreciate that, and we ask that you continue to do so that the algorithm is kind to us, and others that may have need of what we're talking about in the space and want to join in, they can find us. So we really do appreciate that. So, Frankie, I've had a pretty good week. Weather's been holding up for me. We did get a little bit of rain, but all in all, the temperature has been great. It hasn't been too hot. It hasn't been too cold. It's just been like that real comfortable temperature that you have in the days between spring and, I guess, true summer.
Yeah,
What's going on with you?
It's been a little out of the ordinary in terms of the weather, though, because typically North Carolina weather, we go straight from winter into like maybe 2-3 days of what would be spring weather, and then we're in the blast furnace of summer. But yeah, this year seems like it's been a little bit different since we've had an actual spring, and I'm here for it. Yeah, I'm here for it. This is that great weather to be outside on the deck. We talked about it. I live out in the country, so I go out on the deck at night, look at the stars, just enjoy the space. So yeah, I'm definitely here for it. Last night was a great night too, to be outside. So, I've mentioned it before about, my oldest son and his lacrosse adventure. So they were in the state playoffs. Had their first game in the first round last night out in Wake Forest. And I'm actually surprised that I'm able to be here recording on the podcast today, because I had absolutely no voice left at the end of that game last night. It was, I think the final score was like 14-12. So it was a high scoring back and forth game. Man, the crowd was animated. It was great weather, great game, great environment. And, thank God my voice is back. So I'm able to be here in the recording space today.
Well, we are glad that your voice is back, sir. We appreciate having you. So thank you for that. And congratulations. Did they win the game?
They did. They won. So they're moving on to the second round.
Awesome.
They play this coming Friday. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll report back.
Awesome. Well, we're going to jump in here, Frankie. Today we're talking about motivation.
Ooh.
And when motivation disappears, right? Because, I know that there are many people on this podcast or listening to this podcast, and you and I included, who have in time had some motivational challenges with how we approach things. And, motivation is great, right? It is fantastic when it's working well for you, until it's not.
It's fleeting. Yeah. Motivation
Absolutely
is fleeting. It's not something that lasts forever. That's for sure.
No. And, I guess one of the wild things is that you get into the space where you're motivated to do a certain thing, a task, a project, or, maybe it's something personal. And, you're just raring and ready to go, and you got all of the juices flowing, and, it seems like the stars are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And, day 1, day 2, everything's great. And day 3, maybe slide off a little bit.
Yeah. It's a pattern. It is a predictable pattern. I know I found myself in that pattern many times before, and colleagues, family members, I've seen it manifest a lot. And I like to refer to it as the shiny new thing syndrome. And we're super focused, we're motivated, we're doing something. And then the newness, when you get a car, you're talking about, the new smell is worn off my car. It doesn't smell like a new car anymore. When that new smell starts to wear off what it is we're doing, we're more easily distracted and pulled off course by the shiny new thing. We see it in, hobbies. We see it in projects like you mentioned. I know for, me in my professional space, I've had this happen where I've been super motivated on a project and I'm pushing, and I get the project done. But in that space after the project is done and before I can build the next one, I am not motivated to do a thing. That is one of my most unproductive times, is that in between as I'm moving to a new task. So that motivation ebbs and flows just like the wind.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes you do just need a break, or feel like you need a break anyway.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess too, it just depends on what's in front of you and how excited you may be to take on that next thing. But it's part of what we're talking about today, because motivation is it's a great start. It's a great spark, right? You get a little infusion, I should say,
Mhm.
maybe of the adrenaline is working. You get that infusion to
Right.
boom, get started, and then sometimes you just hit a wall, because motivation in and of itself is not enough to fuel you through the entire process, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we like you said, it ebbs and flows, and it
Right.
happens uh in a lot of different areas of life, at work and at home. um what do you think about um the folks who can just, like, keep it going, like?
Think that's a good facade. I think it's a good perception, but I don't think it's necessarily reality. Everybody's motivation is going to falter. Like you said, motivation is a spark, but it's not something that can sustain long term. So there has to be a little bit more to it. So I think, those folks that we see, especially if we're talking about in the social media space, somebody can look in the social media space and be like, man, that dude is always killing it. That woman is always killing it. But we have to remember that we're only seeing a small snapshot of their day. We're only seeing a small window into what they want us to see. And even the hardest workers that are going to have moments where motivation falters. And that's where we have to be able to fall back on work structures, on discipline, to be able to help us stay on course. It's not motivation that's going to keep us going all the way through. It's going to be the structures and the discipline that we're able to set up around it. Otherwise, like you said, when that spark flares out, and all we had was motivation, that's when we hit that wall. We see it all the time. Like, we talked about it in our New Year's resolutions episode, how everybody's all gung-ho at the gym at the top of the year, but then by February, that spark of motivation is gone, and there was no structure or discipline in place to help keep things going. Shoot, we see it with our peers in the podcasting realm. I was looking at some stats before our conversation today. So check this out. So as of early this year, in terms of how long, I just looked at some data on how long podcasts keep going. So as of early this year, early 2026, roughly 44% of podcasts fail to make it past 3 episodes.
Wow.
Yep. 44%
Only three?
don't make it past 3 episodes.
That's
90%. Listen, check this out before you comment on this. 90% fail to make it past 10 episodes. Yeah. So again, we could be all gung ho and be super motivated and have some great content to share. But if the structures and things aren't set up, once that motivation falters or life starts lifing and you don't have some support structures around what that motivation sparked, it's going to fall by the wayside.
Those are just some incredible numbers, man. I couldn't help myself. 3, and that's just crazy. I would never have guessed that was the failure rate early on in podcasting. Wow. Well, hey, thank you, sir, for being in this space and helping me stay motivated to keep it going. I appreciate that.
Nope. Not staying motivated. We're staying disciplined.
Disciplined and motivated too. We are motivated
for sure.
to
For sure.
keep it going. Yeah. And I guess that just goes to show that, when you're on the outside looking in, you have a perception that, people who are successful or doing well, that they're always on, right? They are always on. They always feel it, right? But I think that, as you mentioned, is truly not the case. And I think, as you're talking about systems, I think the difference is that those people even if they're not on every day, every moment, what they consistently do is show up, right? They show up
Mhm.
to do the work, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So
and
yeah,
they have
good
to.
stuff.
They have to. And I think that really leans into how we identify ourselves, what pieces of the puzzle we use to compose our self identity. We alluded to this when we had our episodes about habits, and we were talking about the James Clear book, Atomic Habits, and the things that we do are really tied to our identity. So, if we feel, if I identify myself as a runner, I was like, yes, I'm a runner. It's part of my identity to get out there and go, run every morning before I go to work. If I say I'm, somebody who would like to run or something like that, that's not the same, forcefulness of making it a part of my identity. So, James Clear really pushes that in Atomic Habits, that our identity kind of shapes our discipline around what we do.
So I guess that means that we are podcasters versus we have a podcast or we work on a podcast. We are podcasters because we keep showing up.
That's right. That's part of our identity. The motivation is that we want to put something positive out in the space to help people. But the identity is that we're podcasters dedicated to putting out helpful content.
So you talk about, you gave some very interesting statistics there, and you talked about, um, identity and habits. And one of the things that I came across for this podcast is there was a study done in the University of Pennsylvania where they looked at, folks who work and have, grit. And then, those who have self-control. And they were looking at the differences between the folks who operate from grit and folks who operate from self-control. And I thought that was interesting because, grit, they were saying, is staying excited about a big goal or about a goal for an extended period of time, like months or even years, right? That's grit. They have the grit to just like keep going. And they self-control, they liken to winning a battle against something pretty much more immediate, something that's right now. So like something within minutes or hours. And when we talk about um, motivation and that sustainability, I think that grit really does talk about, or it has a place for, if you really want to finish the goal, if you want to reach the end goal, right? um you may grind a little bit to get there and stay and have a why or whatever you have to keep you motivated in that direction. Maybe you have a partner, like you and I work together, we keep each other lifted up, to keep going. And then the self-control is more immediate. And I guess I'll liken the self-control as if you're sitting here and you want to, you're working on a project or you're doing something at your desk, and you think, oh man, I want to get up and go get a snack, or I want to go, something that just takes you away from the task at hand. And if you can overcome that urge at that moment, to stay focused and um, grind it out, grab that motivation to finish the task. What do you think about that?
I think that's interesting. And it ties back into, again, something that James Clear was talking about in the Atomic Habits book. And both of those things, grit and self-control, sound like what Clear described as willpower. And looking at it through that lens, I still think that it still sounds to me that both grit and self-control are exhaustible resources that will fail the same way motivation fails if we don't set ourselves up for success in terms of how we go about chasing after those goals, doing the things that we need to do. So again, having structures and systems in place to help facilitate that. Because for me, in the ideal world, I can pursue my goals at a pace that is sustainable indefinitely. So that means I'm moving and I'm operating in such a way that I can run and not get weary. I can do all the things that I need to do not only because I'm motivated to do them, but because I've got structures and systems in place to facilitate my doing of those things.
Yeah, because motivation is, it's emotional.
Hmm.
And so, it can, and your emotions, you talk about the ebb and flow. I mean, emotions ebb and flow, all day, every day. And so, being able to control some of that, if you can, I think helps with the outcome.
A-
Um,
Real quick, while you're talking about feelings and emotions, I can identify with that very personally because um, I can look back at when I was training for my full marathon that I ran. On any training run, I would go through the full spectrum of all the emotions. Yes, I was
mm,
motivated to run a marathon. That was something I had on my checklist. It's like, all right, before I leave this earth, I want to run a marathon. So that was the motivation. I set up a training plan and had, milestones and things like that to create the structure. But man, did those feelings ebb and flow. On a given training run, I could be so pumped up, like, yeah, let's go, let's get it. I'm like Ray Lewis before a football game coming out all hype. A couple of miles in, I'm crying. Why am I doing this? This is terrible. I don't want to be out here. And just questioning my entire existence. And then, going in circles through that loop of emotions. So I definitely can identify with how feelings ebb and flow.
it's funny when you, you said that, it made me think of when I was in basic training, and I took basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And we had, we go out for our runs, marches, walks, all the different things, right? But for whatever reason, we always had to come back by way of this hill. It's called Drag Ass Hill. And I just remember the first time that I actually took Drag Ass Hill, I was like, WTF, what am I doing here? And why on earth did I volunteer for this type of punishment to myself? So I get the whole uh, uh, you know, crying and
Yeah,
all the emotion for running the marathon. And of course, you get over that. I mean, in my case, I didn't have any choice because
because you had
you know
structure. It
because
wasn't
I
it
had
wasn't necess-
structure.
it wasn't necessarily your structure, but you were embedded within a structure that didn't let you get off target when your motivation gave out.
And let's be honest, it was not my structure, but I made it through. It became my structure. Let's put it that way. It became my structure. All
Gotcha.
right. So, and that's a good segue into, we're talking about discipline and identity and systems in that. And let's talk about, you know, discipline it has to do with like your foundation of how you can, get things done. Right. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. This is where the
let's,
shift
let's,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah. This
let's
is where
talk
the
about
shift
some of that.
happens. So when we're talking about discipline, let's make sure we're clear though. We're talking about discipline in terms of structure and repeatability around what we do, not us being disciplined. Like I did something bad and I have to be disciplined. But discipline is really that's the non-negotiables. When we're going into a situation, we have to have something that is non-negotiable. This is the point beyond which I refuse to let myself fall. And discipline is what holds us above that standard. And what that really boils down to for me is a saying that I've shared with colleagues and accountability partners throughout the years is that we do what we say we will do, and we stay disciplined to uphold that mantra. So that gives us the structure. If I say I did it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to, I might be down in the doldrums and sad, but I was like, you know what? I said I'm going to do it. And my adherence to that level of discipline is what's going to see me.
Yeah, because that discipline, it floats into that identity of who you are, right? Um, Especially, I mean, if it's strong, if
Mhm.
it's and if it's I think if it's intentional, it just kind of flows into who you are.
Uh-huh.
And it just makes me think, for many years after I left the army, it's amazing how many people, that I work with said, you were in the army, weren't you? Right? Just because of that whole like we talked about, that structure and that
Uh-huh.
discipline, and that, it just became part of my identity, who I was, who I am. um and so, one of the things we talked about you brought up James Clear, and one of the things that he said about structure and identity and so forth is that you don't rise to your level of your goals, you fail to the level of your systems. So that speaks to what you were talking about having the systems and the structure and a foundation in place to sustain you to reach that goal, even if you're not as motivated today as you would like to be.
Right. And those, I mean, we can set any goal that we want to, but if we don't have a plan or a system of how to get there, the likelihood that we will ever achieve that goal is infinitesimally small. So we have to make sure that we've got that system in place. Like I mentioned, that whole do what you say you will do. Well, that's, some people may take that in and say, well, that's pretty easy for you to say, Frankie. You've run for umpteen years or whatever. No, it's not. It's not easy for me to say. And to make sure that I can do what I say I will do, I'm very intentional about broadcasting my intention to other people. It's like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Back when I was a smoker and I was ready to quit smoking, I let everybody in that around me know, it's like, hey, I'm going to stop smoking. And then what that did is that pulled a whole bunch of other people in to help build structure and help me when my motivation failed.
But and that's a good point. When you talk about doing what you say you're going to do, I mean, that plays into really everything in life, not necessarily just big goals, big projects, but just everyday life. Right?
Huh?
If I tell you, we're going to get together and meet at 6 o'clock, and part of the onus of us getting together at 6 o'clock is that I show up at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is something that Kyle and I talked about when when we were training partners, training for the different events that we would do. And one of the mantras we had, in addition to the whole do what you say you will do, was how you do anything is how you do everything.
Mhm.
So there are small things that happen throughout the day that would fall into that anything category that are strong indicators of how we would handle everything else. Like if I'm in my workplace and I walk past and I see a piece of trash on the floor right beside the trash can and I choose not to pick it up. That tells me that, that gives information about how I behave in certain situations. How you do anything is how you do everything. And if we're lax in some areas, it is easy for that to bleed over into others. And it leads into that other saying too. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So that, again, going back to that notion of identity and how that plays into governing our actions.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's very easy to just blow off things, right?
Mhm.
That's the easy way out. And some of the things we blow off are easy things.
For sure.
And so, we talk about habits and making habits easy so that we can, really build them up and actually make them consistent habits. The same token is that we let ourselves off the hook sometimes and just blow off the easy things, which whether we do that consciously or unconsciously, just because we're just kind of going through the motions of life and motions of the day. But, when you really think about it, some of the things that you will offer not necessarily
Mhm.
uh, difficult things. So um, I guess that's a personal accountability uh, you know, um, uh, for your habits and keeping you on track to reach your goals, whether you're motivated or not.
Yeah, and I still think that points back to the systems, like in the James Clear quote that you said. I still think it falls back to that because if you think about it, the purpose of those systems is for us to be able to let the system do the heavy lifting for us. Think about all the different systems and processes that get designed. A lot of the systems that get designed in the workplace. Oh, we've got this system. Well, we've got this big CRM system that's going to keep track of all of our contact information and make it a lot easier. So it does the heavy lifting for us. That system keeps us disciplined. Or in a manufacturing space, we've got the ERP system that's got all the work orders and tracking inventory and all that other stuff. We want the system to do the heavy lifting. Day to day, I bet there are a bunch of listeners listening right now who live or who exist in their workspace day to day by what's on that calendar. whatever that Outlook calendar is telling them coming up next. This meeting is due. This project is, has got to be due on this date. The calendar governs their actions. So again, I would say having a system in place, even if it is those small things that we choose to blow off, if we put them in place within the right system, we can help gird ourselves against blowing them off.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have friends who have, you know, school-age children, and if they don't write things down because they have so many children that have to be in so many different places and so many things are going on, fundraisers, this, that, and the other.
Whew.
Yeah, I mean, it is it's a tool that works no matter what your environment is. But then the tool is only as good as, you operate the tool as
Right.
well, right?
As good as the information that you put into it, your
Yeah.
willingness to actually leverage it, for sure.
All right, cool. Well, let's uh let's talk a little bit about commitment to the cause. Let's talk about commitment and how that flows into the ignite stage
Hmm.
our of our pause, shift, and ignite process.
So, Nuge, we just finished talking about the shift and the role that systems and structure can play in helping us to do the heavy lifting. When we see the ignition, that's when I think our mindset starts to change a little bit too. We start to ignite when we realize that, we always think about this notion of how we're going to do on our best day, but we tend to ignore like, all right, well, what's going to happen when I'm not at my best? So the ignition comes when we recognize, that time that I'm not at my best has some significance in me achieving my goal, and starting to put some effort into having contingency plans or just understandings around what it means to not be at your best but still move forward. That's when the ignition can begin.
Yeah, and I think that part is really difficult because you don't I don't think people really want to admit sometimes that they're not at their best, or at least not when it really matters. Like even wake up in the morning and say, I'm just not I'm not feeling it today. I'm not 100% this morning or whatever, right?
Mm.
You can have that feeling. But, when you're working on a big project and things are just really flowing, not necessarily that you're in the flow because you're not feeling your best. Like, is that a time when you really want to acknowledge that? Do you acknowledge that to yourself? Do you acknowledge that to the folks that you're working with? I think it's difficult for people to talk about because that gets personal, right? That makes you
It does.
vulnerable
It
to
does.
to talk about. And, I'm not sure that we all are, in that place to admit that sometimes.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to sit here and try to argue that it is easy. Being vulnerable at any time is difficult, and it requires trust and it requires confidence. And, sometimes for all of us, those things are in short supply. But even if we don't admit it out loud to the world, we have to be willing to admit it in our internal monologue, our internal
Mhm.
dialogue with ourselves. We got to be honest with ourselves. This is a conversation that I have with my kids on a regular basis, specifically around the arena of sports. And the conversation goes something like this: you're not going to set a personal best every day. You're not going to be the superstar every game. You're not going to make the game winning shot every game. You're not always going to be the top, at the tippy top of the best that you can be every time. But you have to figure out what you're willing to say is the non-negotiable that you're going to give every time that you step out on that field of competition. And I think that's what happens with us sometimes is we spend all this time visualizing and imagining what the ceiling is. Like, all right, what's the highest that I can go? What's the best that I can be? But in fact, what we need to think about is the floor. And it's not how low can I go? It is how low am I willing to or what can I set in place to prevent me from going any lower than this? The floor is what covers that pit that leads to rock bottom that we talked about in previous episodes. So just as much as we think about the ceiling, we need to think about setting that floor. And over time, what we'll see, if we're able to stay disciplined, if we're able to have structures in place, over time, our floor will rise and that ceiling gets closer.
That's a good point. You talk about sports, use the sports analogy, and I think about basketball. So like if we're in the court and my shot is off, and your shot is on, I'm feeding you the ball, right?
Mhm.
Because the goal is for us to win this game. And recognizing that, I'm not contributing in that way, I can contribute in a different way. And I think that that's, part of what that floor is that you're talking about. It's not necessarily that I can't contribute, but at what level can I contribute to still, um, you know, help myself or help others be successful.
Right. And it's pretty clear cut too, in the sense that doing something is always going to be better than doing nothing. So if we had set the goal of, all right, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to run on the treadmill for 45 minutes. And you wake up like, oh man, I'm not feeling like it. I don't want to do it. Going to the gym and just doing it for 10 minutes is better than just not doing anything at all. So that 10 minutes is the floor that we're talking about. All right, if I can have non-negotiables, or like, we've talked before about how you and I do our push-ups before, while our coffee is brewing. There's a number that I've got set that I'm trying to get to, but some days my shoulder's hurting or I'm not feeling it. So there's a floor that I've got set. I'm still going to do something. I may not get to that goal that I had set for myself, but I'm going to do something. And that doing something is still moving me in the direction towards my.
Those are true facts, sir, because not every morning do I feel like reaching the number that I have that that I want to do, right? But as you mentioned, something's got to happen, right? Can't
Sure.
can't go in there and not do it at all. So very good.
Yeah. It's like, and like we talked about, motivation is the spark that gets you
Yeah,
moving. But having structure around our floor is what sustains us. If you think about what a floor does, it supports us, right?
right,
And it's the same thing as we approach our goal.
right. All right. Well, let's talk about burnout versus the lack of motivation. Is there a
Whew.
difference?
Gosh, yes. Sometimes to the outside observer, people may misconstrue the two, but as an internal feeling, those things are definitely different in my book. Um, Lack of motivation is just like, all right, well, yeah, I don't feel like doing that, but I want to go do something else. Burnout is when for me, it seems like burnout is when I'm just spent. I'm empty. There's
Yeah,
nothing left, right?
you hit the
For,
wall.
I've hit the wall. I've got nothing left.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, burnout is real. Burnout is real.
yeah, and I think I agree that burnout is real. And, unfortunately, we don't always recognize it for what it is, um, before it becomes really bad for us or detrimental for us.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's something that we as individuals have to pay attention to, especially if we're driven, like we are, to accomplish things. Um, to recognize when you just need to say, you know what, I just need to take a step back and take a break and just regroup and just take a few minutes to get myself back together, whether it's rest, whether it's sleep, whether it's a cup of coffee, a walk in the park, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Just recognizing that you need a moment to just recuperate.
So what are some of things that what are some observable things? Like if I'm trying to just sit back and take a moment to check myself, what are some things that I could look for to determine whether or not I just need more motivation or if I'm actually burnt out? Like, what are some of the questions I should be asking myself to make that determination?
Well, for me, I think some of the determining factors um, are my disposition, my attitude, or my outlook. How short I am when folks ask me a question, or how frustrated I might get if I'm not quickly getting the answer for something that I'm looking for. To me, those can be signs of uh, burnout. Maybe not burnout, but maybe just I just need to step away from this and take a moment to clear my head, clear my thoughts. And I think that those are some, you can ask yourself those questions like, hey, news, what's going on with you that you're, being short with people, or what's going on with you that you have this frustration. Clearly, you're frustrated. So what is making you frustrated? What's adding to that? And I don't know that people talk to themselves like that all the time. I think it's healthy. I mean, even though society may say, well, if you talk to yourself, you know something wrong with you. But I think it's healthy for you to ask yourself, those types of questions, especially when you can see or when you can feel that, your emotions are kind of going over the cliff a little bit.
Yeah, I think everyone has limits. None of us
Mm.
have infinite reserves of energy and ability to keep pressing forward. We've all got limits. And I like how you put that because it really drives home the fact for me is that we can't recognize that we're burnt out until we pause. We have to pause if we want to be able to assess whether or not we're burnt out. And that's a huge inflection point.
Yeah, and that's why we talk about the things that we do. The pause, the shift, and ignite, because the pause is always first.
For sure.
It will help you to move past a myriad of situations if you just give yourself a moment to just kind of take in the situation. So
Yeah. And I think we could have a whole nother podcast episode with burnout, specifically talking about, all right, what can we do? What can we do to avoid burnout instead of just recognizing that we're burnt out? It's one thing to recognize that you're burnt out, but it's a whole nother conversation of what we can do to avoid it. So let's put that one down in the books.
yeah, that's probably a good idea, because I think you get into that whole life balance conversation and start talking
Hmm.
about that. All right. Well, uh, I think we've kind of come to the end of this podcast talking about this motivation, and hopefully that we were able to hit home some thoughts for some folks that are listening to us. Any last words, Frankie, that you want to leave our audience?
Yes, actually, as I was preparing for this conversation, uh, an old meme came back to my mind. So we're talking about motivation being a great spark. And we just had the part of our conversation where we were talking about having a floor as our stable point that we're not going to drop below to help us reach the ceiling. And our listeners, I encourage you can go out and look for it. It was a Michael Jordan conversation. He was at UNC speaking for some event. And I don't know what Mike was talking about, but they turned it into a meme because he said very, very animatedly from a podium in front of thousands of people, the floor is the ceiling. And that's it. The floor is the ceiling. So you can look for that Michael Jordan quote, but when you really think about it, the way that we've just talked about it, if we set
Mhm.
that floor, here's the minimum amount that I have to do. I've agreed that I'm not going to drop below this point. We
Mhm.
start to get reps in. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, our floor raises a little bit each
Rises up.
time.
Yeah.
And before you know it, the floor and the ceiling might even be on the same level. So
Right. Right.
maybe MJ was right. The floor is the ceiling. That's what we should strive for.
I like that. Bring the floor up.
Yeah.
Don't bring the ceiling down. Bring the floor up.
Yeah.
Like that a lot. All right. Well, we hope that this episode has hit with you, our audience. And if it did, please, by all means, share with someone who may be going through something that needs a little motivation or some uplifting. Share this podcast with them and have some conversation with them, have some community with them and help them through. So I'm going to leave it there. Frankie, if you don't mind, if you will tell our audience where they can find us, that'd be fantastic.
You know it. So for all things PSI Effect podcast related, you can go to our website. This is psipod.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and all the many podcast platforms on which you can subscribe, follow, and keep track so you don't miss an episode. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all the places. I encourage you to go out there and make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode when it comes out. You can also find us on YouTube if you want to see the full videos of these podcast episodes. You can use our handle at This Is PSI Pod, and that handle is also what we use on social media at This Is PSI Pod for Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and again, YouTube. Check us out. We'd love to hear from you.
Indeed, and we do love hearing from you, and we appreciate you being here. We thank you for your support. And so just remember, until next time, remember that setbacks are temporary, and comebacks are indeed legendary. And until we meet again, go out there and be brave and rise on purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the PSI Effect Podcast. This show doesn't happen without you, and you can connect with us via Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit our website at thisispsipod.com and find us on YouTube and social media at This Is PSI Pod. That's at This Is PSI Pod. Until next time, remember, be brave and rise on purpose.